All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sean, and I have my colleague Chester with me here today. And we are from the globalization team at Netflix, in charge of our team, specifically in charge of IT technology at Netflix. So it's very glad to be here today. In this session, Chester and I are going to present how we tackle date, time, and time zone format for Netflix live events. All right, it's almost time. It's the waiting room if you're turning to Netflix live event. If everyone is ready, let's get started. All right, so some of you may have already heard about this highly anticipated heavyweight boxing fight that's going to be coming soon on Netflix Friday, November 15, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And then on Christmas Day, we're going to be hosting two NFL games, one at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The other one is at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then next, in January 2025, coming soon, we're going to be hosting World Wrestling Entertainment event live at Netflix. So very, very exciting indeed. So those are the live events coming, and we have actually delivered live events in the past. If you haven't already, I highly recommend the Roast of Tom Brady. It's hilarious. Check it out. As we've seen on the previous screen, as well as this screen, Dinner Time with David Chan, one of the key prominent elements on the screen is the event time. So it is very important that we have the event time correct, and then we bring awareness, we bring anticipation, and we help user plan the live event to turn in, right? And then the important one for the event time, including date, right? Most frequently used are day of week, month and day. We're all very familiar with that. And then they are time also. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is depending on the country and the culture, it could be using 12 hours, like in the US, right? We use, 5 a.m., 10 a.m., 5 p.m., and it could be using 24 hours, which is pretty common in the Europe. So it really depends on country and the language. And then for countries that has time zones, more than one time zones. Now, there are some countries, they have only one time zone, right? Like Japan, Great Britain. But there are countries like in the US, in Canada, and Mexico, we have more than one time zone. So what does this mean? If we have more than one time zone, that means a time itself is ambiguous. Without time zone, a time is ambiguous. So now if on services, we could, if the space is super constrained, we could show time alone, right? And then if that's the case, the user would highly likely to interpret that time as their local time in the country with more than one time zone. And then I don't think it's very common for off-service services to use a time without time zone, because that would be really, really confusing. What time are we really talking about, right? With social media, it's also very important to bring the time zone together with time so that people know where they're going to plan this gathering party, right? Together, watch together. So, okay. So now, Netflix, we have 38 UI localization languages. And then we are live in more than 190 countries and regions, serving more than 280 million users in different languages. This is a task that looks easy, but it's hard. Fortunately, we have a library that we use within Netflix. is Netflix and I18 library, which leverages the ICU4J and CLDR data to format a date, time, and time zone that is correct and anticipated for the local user. So this speaking the power of the ICU and CLDR and the impact of this conference. So now, if on the UI, if the space is very constrained, right? For example, on the cell phone or on a screen that you have very limited space, like a call out or a button, right? We need to find the shortest representation possible to avoid UI truncation and stuff like that. So we started to look at what are we looking at, basically? What are the options out there? So we found out the months and day of week often have commonly accepted abbreviations that we can use in the space, when the space is really confined. For example, months and day, numeric months and day, they range from 5 to 7 characters long for the languages, 38 languages we support. An abbreviated day of week ranges from like 2 to 8 characters long, right? Now, the number of characters is only one factor in the equation. There are other factors such as the font choice, font size, right, and the style. So, however, though, when we have all this information, we can calculate, given a certain space, what are the maximum characters per language that we can have without causing UI truncation. So this is good news to us. And then when we look at the time, without time zone, time alone ranges from 5 to 9 characters long, which is also not too bad if you look at this, right? But then here comes the challenge. For countries, as we mentioned before, for countries has more than one time zone, we really have to, at one point, put the time and time zone together so that there is no ambiguity to the user. When we look at the time zone display, time zone names, it's pretty challenging, right? So we can dive a little deeper into this. It's a lot of knowledge behind the scene about the time and time zone. But if we look at the time zone, they are commonly used styles. For example, we have a short style in PST short for Pacific Standard Time, or PDT for Pacific Daytime. And we could have a long form, Pacific Time spelled out. Or we could have a generic location form, which, like in terms of Los Angeles, it could be Los Angeles time, right? So for English users in the US, it's really actually a good news because we can use the PST. It's very common, it's well understood. So here we go. However, for other countries around the world, this may not be the case. Let's take a look at Greek in Greece. The short form will be, for the time zone name, would be EET, which is short for European, Eastern European time. And then the long form is the spell out of that in Greek. And then you could have a location option as well. So when we actually have our linguists and language expert in the region, when we're looking at this, we realize we cannot use the short and long form because first of all, they're not very commonly well understood in the country. Secondly, to some users in Greece, they may consider themselves as Western European. So this may be offensive to people. And so, if not for geographic reasons, but for political, economic reasons. So we settle down on location. And then the data coming out of the library default is not the best choice in terms of grammatical correctness in our context. So we have a suggestion sent to us like, hey, can we use this? This says the hour of Greece. So, yeah. So the style matters. And the other factor is as shown on here, the length can be quite large, right? So we have some example here. We have English, we have Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and then the last one is Ukrainian. And so, short PDT, short and sweet, perfect. But as we go on to other languages, it gets longer and longer. And then if we cannot find a way to shorten this or find a way to rephrase this or find a better representation, it's really hard for the UI to handle. So we set out to find the shortest possible time zone names. Now, in addition to what we mentioned earlier, there's another a challenge, which this morning session touched upon on this. This is the grammatical agreement, right? For languages such as Portuguese and Spanish, when the hour part is 1, we need to ensure it's using singular. RLA, not here. But when the hour is other than 1, we need to make sure we use the correctly grammatical plural form here. So now this looks simple, right? But this means programmatically, we need a way behind the scene to evaluate the time itself, the hour part, to ensure that we meet this requirement before it's formatted into local form. So keeping all these factors in mind, we set out to find the most concise, accurate, and locally meaningful time and time zone representations. We did a thorough review of all the data that we dumped from the library out, and then selected the best style for each country and language combination. And then we also have recommendations to override some time zone names in the time format. But we need a mechanism to be able to represent this to the user. So we designed a mechanism to do just that. We can format the date and then separate the time and time zone component, as well as giving a plural indicator. And the nice thing about separating time and time zone is the same data. When the space is constrained, we can choose to show the time only. And then when we have more space, when the user gets into the details page of the show, then we can show the exact same time with its time zone together. So with that, we get rid of the ambiguity there. And also we incorporated a building a mechanism to quickly change a style, a format, or a string if needed. So this is all like dynamic. We can use a dynamic value to change that, switch that. And the other thing, like I really want to mention, is really important as we try to find the shortest one. It's not always possible. It's not likely we can find always find the PST style. So one thing we observed, I think, is with the short form, it sometimes comes back to us as a GMT style time zone name in or UTC style, which is short, but is not, like most of the cases in some countries, they're not well understood at all. So we are trying to avoid that as much as we can. This is a just quick kind of bird's eye view of what this API does. This API will take a date object, which is a time in the time axis for this live event. And then we'll take a user locale, which is one of our 280 million users, right? Their languages. And then we also know where they locate time zone ID, the user is viewing. And after we get that information, we would return a formatted user local time, which can be used in the sentence. And then we can return the time zone display name as well as a plural indicator for the definitive article before the hour part for the languages that needs it. So here we did some curation to make it shorter. Here are some examples. The red ones are coming from the library by default. The green ones are the ones that we get it shorter. So like, for example, Brazil standard time, our Brazilian Portuguese experts mention like the standard itself, the word standard is not necessary. So we remove that, save some space there. So those are just some examples that we did here. So now we have a library, fortunately, thanks to ICU, thanks to CLDR, we have a library behind the scene doing all this work, right? And it's highly scalable. But with the large amount of data and large amount of permutation for like the user language, user location, right? User time zone, we really need a tool to make this visible, to make this interactive, so that we can anticipate what a local time would look like. And most importantly, it also establishes company-wide data reference for source of truth for local time globally. Because we have on service, which is Netflix streaming services, is powered by the infighting library. We also have off services, marketing material, and all that, which actually is needing. We want to facilitate internal data alignment. So with this tool, we can potentially do that. And also we could potentially with this tool, we can potentially streamline local time data generation and for off services usage, right? Right now, off services, most time are manual to given the time, and then we calculate, what is the local time for this region, for this language. So with this tool, we can help with that as well. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague Chester to talk more about the new feature in the I18 Explorer tool. Thank you. We'll take questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I think as Sean mentioned, we want to build a tool so that all users, both technical and non-technical, they can visualize what the data looks like, what the exact formatted time, and what is the exact time zone display name will look like, even before it gets to the Netflix UI. Sometimes it takes a while to get to the Netflix UI because teams will have to adopt our library, and then so it takes a while. So what we want to do is expedite that process, like so to show them they can visualize what it looks like right away. Here's a page. So we built an internal tool to do just that. Here's a page where it shows all the time zone information. User can select the country, the language, and the date time, and also the time zone ID. So one thing I want to point out is for all the Netflix live events, it's promoted in Eastern time zone, so US Eastern time zone. And so we made our tool accordingly. So when a user selects a daytime, it's in Eastern time zone. So once we gather all the information, we will return back the formatted time and also the time zone display name. A lot of times the Netflix live events are promoted in a future date. And we allow users to select a date in the future, a date in the past. By default, it goes to the current time. So you may have noticed for the past couple of screenshots, we are using November 15th. So what's so special about November 15th? Oh, it's because it's my birthday. Just kidding, just kidding. it is my birthday, but then we're not using November 15th for that reason. Sean mentioned it before. She will also talk about it later on. So here's an example of an Netflix live event on November 15th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be 10 a.m. in Japan. And here's the time. So for that same Netflix live event, it will be 2 a.m. in Germany. And it will be 4 a.m. in Saudi Arabia. So we have a list of priority markets that the marketing team focuses on. So it's super important for everyone to know exactly what will be the formatted time and also the time zone display name. So our tool can provide that. So we have a slideshow showing all the expected formatted time and time zone display names. Yeah, we are constantly kind of working on to improve this tool. What we are working on right now is to allow users to select multiple countries, multiple languages, multiple time zone IDs, so that we can get all the information back and display the results in bulk. And also allow the user to export the results in Excel spreadsheet and different file formats. We are gathering feedback from our internal users and also contractors so that we can know what to improve on. And yes, we're constantly making it to be better. So now back to Sean to talk about what's so special about November 15th. Not because it's my birthday.
Yeah, so November 15th, we're going to have Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight. And we are working really hard before the event happens on the date and time zone. So when it's live, we're going to have all the time celebrating Chester's birthday on the 15th. All right. So thank you. Thank you very much. And we can take questions if they are.
I think we'll start with the question over here.
Yeah, so I have a question. Is this iTunes Explorer public or is it an internal tool at Netflix?
It's an internal tool
Okay.
at this moment. Yeah, and definitely I think it will be useful to have a similar tool out there. I didn't, to my knowledge, I couldn't find such one. But our tool is hosting our data. So we're looking, maybe we contributing the data back to CLDR, keep in mind though, like we are at entertainment industry. So the name we choose may not be suitable for all cases. There may be formal cases that need a different name, or you need to be absolutely correct about a name, right? So what we have a little wiggle room there.
Thank you.
We can try to alternate sides of rooms. So one question over here, one question over here.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
One quick one. Would you consider opening up or sharing, making public your I18N library? I think you said NF.
NF18,
I18N.
and NF means Netflix. Yeah, Netflix 18 library. Maybe a little bit about NF18 library. We are a wrapper on top of ICU. And then the nice thing about having a wrapper for any company, actually, for that matter, is you can do customization based on your use case and need. We thought about, we had a discussion about that, and then I definitely will bring it back for discussion. We need to kind of make a decision, in the company.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then your translations for your time zones, do you get those directly from CLDR?
Most of the time zones are coming from CLDR,
Okay.
like default. We only customize the ones that we think either too long or we don't want to, certain part we want to customize on it. But majority of the data coming from ICU and CLDR. So that's the power of ICU and benefit, everyone gets on top of ICU.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So my question is about, could you speak a little bit about the decision to include a time zone identifier in pretty much all cases? So my personal context is that I'm Finnish, and in Finland, for content in Finnish, it would be really strange and unusual for any time zone identifier to be included because there is only one time zone in Finland. And this applies to, I think, almost all European countries. So could you just not have the time zone there, and then it would be clear to the user, if they're coming from that region and they're using the language of that region, what it is that you mean by a time?
Really, really good question. This is actually what we want. The thing that we can not do that at this moment is the geo services that we use cannot accurately determine the time zone to 100% correctness. So like for the user around the border of the country or certain region, it comes down to how accurate our geo service provider is. We're looking at this though, and we're looking at maybe we can take a combination of factors, and then if all align, you can take a risk and lean towards not showing the time zone. Yeah, the time zone actually does only make sense for a country with multiple time zones. Yeah, it's a good question.
Hi. So you said that NF18N uses or wraps ICU4J. Does this mean you render all the time zone names on the server? And then the other part of the question is, you kind of answered this in the previous response already, but how do you determine the user's time zone? Do you do this with the JavaScript input stuff or geolocation?
Yeah, good question. The first one, it's a really good question because in order to use different sources, we really want to ensure the data is aligned, right? So, and that's not there yet. We're looking at ICU4X, which is our new the UI layer, that in the hope that we have the consolidation of the common CLDR data, and then find a way to lay on that our own customization, right? And if we can contribute back to CLDR the data, maybe we don't even need that customization on our layer. And so, yes, the question is, the critical live events right now, even for the messagings that we send out on the UI, are all powered by our backend services. We have really brilliant infrastructure and framework in place, which is make this possible. Yeah, and then the second question for the user the time zone ID, we rely on our geo services. We use a third-party geo services provider, and they will kind of tell us the time zone where the user is, and that's where the problem comes from. Then there's a possibility of misdetection of the time zone. So we cannot not show them because the time then will be misleading in that case. But we're trying to improve on that. Yes?
Hello. Okay, there we go. My name's Hi, my name's Jonathan. I'm from the Middlebury Institute. I was kind of curious about how daylight savings time affects things, like especially if you're using a US time zone, like the Eastern time zone, for instance, as a basis. Like thinking about the November 15th event, for instance, right now, 8 p.m. Eastern time is going to mean something different than it will on November 15th, because daylight savings is, I think, November 3rd. So I'm just curious, do you have to sort of account for that? Or is that something that kind of happens automatically when you're like planning ahead for the live events and translating the time into other locales? I'm just curious how that gets handled.
Yeah, that's the beauty of using the ICU library. Is handled automatically. The one thing we need to do is we need to ensure the time zone data is up to date, because the daylight rules keep changing for some countries, right? So we need to make sure we're using the latest one. For example, I think Mexico kind of just stop using the daylight time. Brazil might also stop using that. So we need to make sure you just upgrade to the latest ICU, and then you should be able to get that for free. Yeah.
Hi. So, at least from my perspective, when I look at like a TV guide or something like that, I see all times in local time, and I don't see a time zone at all. And when it comes to that kind of scenario, I can query the time zone of my operating system. So if I have a native app, which Netflix does have, you can just query the time zone there, and then there's no geo guessing, because the time zone is a state of mind, not a physical location. And so if you can query the local OS for that, that's better. I know that in some web browsers, you can sort of get that. I mean, sort of. Sometimes you need the IANA time zone ID. You might be able to get that now, but previously it's been an issue for me in the past. And I'm wondering, why do you rely on the geocoding or the geolocation when, if you can get it as a setting through other means, why not use that?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. Come back to similar question before. I think we previously do not need that. Before live event, we don't use frequently. You need to use a time zone, right? And then this is a software system thing that we need to sort out, which we are doing it. Live come to Netflix is very, very new. We have maybe 2 years, I'm not exact sure, but it's like everything coming up together. So, but I assure you, this is an issue that's top of our mind. And this is what you mentioned is one option we actually are exploring. Our platform team are exploring the user, other means, one of which is the device time zone and location, right? Not to depend on geolocation services. But this is like a thing that's going to take some time to sort out. But we want to get there. When we are getting it really accurate, we don't need to show time zone for country with only one time zone. That's yeah.
My name is Brian McConnell. I'm with Localization Technology Partners. Sort of a related question is, this really seems like the kind of thing that should just be in your basic account settings along with your preferred language and that sort of thing. And you can always pre-populate that, with a geolocation and then just allow the user to override it. Seems like that would be pretty airtight.
Yeah, and I think Chester can add more to this. I think this is maybe come to a privacy thing that we're taking, not lightly. We don't collect, for example, user gender. We don't, like this sensitive the thing. We are not trying to collect that. And so to my knowledge, I don't think we have a specific time zone setter in our setting. We may ask user in some features to confirm. In other feature, like where is your home, right? Where do you consider your home for the MHU initiative when we are trying to see how many accounts are streaming from different places. But yeah, those are the data things that are beyond our I18 layer. But we can, if we have a accurate information, well, we can use that.
I think another challenge for setting that in the profile settings is how users travel, right? So they don't just stay in like one kind of geolocation. So if they travel around, then like we can ask them, or we can expect them to keep changing their profile settings. Yeah.
This may be the last question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Joel from Spotify. I was wondering, how do you persist like the time for an event? Like, is it always in Eastern time? Do you know how it's stored in the database or anything like that?
I think the reason we use Eastern time is to conform with certain events. You know, the convention is the Eastern time leading Pacific time. So we just want to pick one so that it's easier for everybody. Internal representation and storage, I would imagine, is using a very standard format for the data object. Yeah. So.
Okay. So
I think Jose over here had said he had a very quick comment.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to like be grateful for the fact that you try to determine location, because I think that we go to like the norm, like what to expect. Why do we need multiple time zones? But there's a lot of people who are like traveling daily across borders, who live close to the border, and then they'll get like reliable. Their phone doesn't know exactly where they are. Their computer doesn't know exactly where they are. They're like jumping on flights and still, you know, streaming across back and forth, sometimes within the same day, changing into time zones are like very, very different. So I think I just wanted to say there's a lot of like complex scenarios in which what you're doing makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think in the final end state we want to get all the technology stack. It's maturing really fast. This is how like we do things on Netflix. Like it's scrappy at the beginning, but it's maturing really fast. And hopefully we can no need to show time zone there. But like you said, there are complex other situations needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Great. And Sean and Chester, I saw there's still like at least 3 or 4 more hands out here that we just didn't have time to get to today. So, you know, continue to find Sean and Chester during the breaks and at the happy hour tonight. And, you know, it's a very, very good talk. This is also very relevant to the work I do. So thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you.